Welcome back to another episode of Brings the Juice. Welcome on, friend of the show, Mr. Zach Boyd from the No Horsing Around podcast. Zach, man, it's been a minute. I know life has probably been crazy for you as well.
Yeah.
Man, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, man. Cody, thanks as always for having me on. And it's getting to that point where we're starting to get that itch again, right? Getting ready to talk about OTAs. The schedule was released on Tuesday, and just excited to get to actual football and get down to it and see what some of these young players have in store with this new, coaching regime and really just this new era of Indianapolis Colts football.
Yes, exactly. And with that, I wanted to preface this video because I know there's probably some people who are about ready to type some things up or comment some things. And so I want to preface this video talking about overrated and underrated position groups on the Indianapolis Colts by saying this. The Colts won 4 games last year. So it's kind of difficult to say a certain position is overrated. But I think the reason, Zach, is we were kind of talking about what some of those positions might be is we kind of thought like they're not, it's not like we're saying these positions are bad or necessarily like positions that lack talent or anything like that. I think what we're more getting at is like some of these positions, I think people can have a tendency to think, oh, this position's fine or this position's proven when they really haven't proven anything quite yet, right? There's been some flashes, but like it hasn't necessarily like fully translated yet. Now, at this point next year, it could. We could be talking about it as a strength. But as it stands right now, those are kind of some of the reasons why we have certain positions or have certain things, because we aren't just talking about position groups. We're talking about, just overall on the team as well. So that's kind of why we say that. But let's start there, Zach. Let's start with that, with some of the overrated position groups if we're talking about. Not that we're saying the positions are bad, but like
Right.
overrated maybe a little bit by some of the fans for the
Yeah, I mean,
inexperienced piece. What do
I
you say?
guess yeah, I guess like you kind of saying in the intro there, start off with the tight end group. Just a lot of the unknowns, Cody. We talked about it before we got on here. So much talent in that room. Everybody's so high as I am on, Jelani Woods, Kylan Granson. You got a Mo Alley Cox in there. We'll see what happens with that. Some young guys, it'd be nice to get Drew Ogletree back, coming off that terrible ACL injury last year. Mallory that we drafted. A lot of talent, but we just don't have a guy yet. We hope to develop that, a guy who's really broke out and has any reason for us to say, hey, this is a absolute bona fide superstar in the tight end room. It's just a lot of really good, talented pieces. And it's up to Shane Steichen to kind of mold that clay together and see what he can get out of that tight end group, a la Dallas Goedert, like he did, in Philadelphia in his time there. So for that reason, I would say that they're a little bit overrated because there's just so much hype around that position without a lot of production to back that up at this point. Now, you mentioned it earlier. If we get into this time next year and do another overrated, underrated, this tight end group could just take off. And then we're not even talking about that and having that same discussion anymore.
Absolutely. And I think when you look at the skilled positions on the Colts right now, Zach, I mean, it's pretty fair to say the tight end room, maybe due to a lack of, experience, is clearly the position that you have the most questions about right now. I mean, it's clearly the least experienced position. You have some pieces that you like. I'm not arguing that there's not talent there because there clearly is with guys. We talked about Jelani Woods, Kylan Granson, who I thought looked nice when he was actually given targets last year. And you have Will Mallory, who you drafted. You brought in a couple other guys in the offseason as well. And then obviously Drew Ogletree coming back too. But like the fact that, Zach, when you look at so for example, just if people are curious, like Jonathan Taylor, we already know what he's able to provide at the running back position. He led the league, so there's no real questions there on can he do it, right? And about that room really, other than can he stay healthy. Michael Pittman. I mean, I know it's a little bit less, but he's proven he's been an 1,000-yard receiver. I was just looking at it, Zach. Out of all the tight ends right now, Mo Alley Cox is obviously the veteran in that room, and his best year he's ever had came in 2020 when he had 31 catches for 394 yards and 2 touchdowns. So that should tell you everything about kind of the lack of experience and the lack of really provenness with this group, because even the veteran in this room has never really been anything special, Zach. So I think for that reason, why we like this group and we think there's definitely some talent here that can be developed, I just think it's fair to put them on here right now and see what happens. And if they prove us wrong and, if they prove themselves, then we're going to be more than happy about that. But some talent here, but not quite proven as of yet. So that's the first one here, talking about overrated. Another one, Zach, that I think when you talk about flashes, this is certainly one that I think has shown flashes, but you haven't really seen the production standpoint, and that's the pass rush department. I mean, we already know, and I think more I could maybe highlight even like the defensive end position, maybe more than even like defensive tackle, because we already know Buckner. I'm going to focus probably more on the pass rush on the edge than anything, just because you have Kwity Paye, you have Dio Dangbo, you brought in Samson Mabukum in the offseason, but really none of these guys have proven that they can be, great to elite players at their position as of yet. Now, it's going to be a big year for some of these guys, but I think maybe some people are thinking this pass rush, is going to be, something special. I mean, they were pretty good last year, but why do you have them here, Zach, as maybe a little bit of an overrated position here?
Well, I think for a lot of the same exact reasons, Cody, that we talked about the tight end position group, a wealth of talent, but we just haven't seen anybody be necessarily dominant in that group, right? Rick Venturi, a guy that we love listening to here on local radio, always talks about you got to have that ambient guy on your defense, guy that keeps the coaches up at night. Like, how do we game plan for this game wrecker? We don't really have a game wrecker when it comes to that position. We hope we develop into that. We haven't seen Kwity Paye be able to be healthy for a full season. He's had some of these hamstring and ankle injuries that have kind of lingered early on in his career. A real good, trajectory for him, but we just haven't had a chance to see a big enough sample size. You mentioned earlier, you got Samson, Beckham. He is a guy that I'm most hopeful in. Kind of an a la, you go back to Danico Autry. When we signed that guy, we were like, what is this about? But Chris Ballard and that staff does a really good job of identifying players that fit well in their system. And you really hope that translates very, very well. But just nobody, he wasn't a full-time starter there. He's going to get his opportunity probably here in Indy. Nobody there has really had an opportunity to just go crazy, and have that double-digit sack total. For that reason, I would say a little bit overrated, because I think we're fairly high on that group, as we, rightfully so, in to some degree. But that being said, we got to see the production meet the expectations. And when we do, this conversation then again probably changes.
Absolutely right. And traditionally, with what Chris Ballard, when it comes to free agency and defensive linemen, not always, but it seems like the guys that he dishes out a little bit of money for, you think Danico Autry, Justin Houston, those guys have typically actually been pretty productive for Indianapolis. So, that, I guess, gives me a little bit of hope that, this isn't just going to be another, Isaac Rochelle situation where he's barely seeing the field. He's going to actually make an impact on this team. And, with more snaps, he was last year, Zach, with less snaps, he was a more productive player than Yannick Ngakoue in a lot of ways, except for really the sack department. So, people think it's going to be an upgrade because he's more of a 3-down player. But obviously, he has to go out there and prove it as well. There's questions about him. People are saying, oh, man, you paid all this money for a guy that's had 5.5 sacks as a career high, right? So he's got to go out there and prove it as well. So not just these young guys, but Abukum as well. So it'll be interesting. And Zach, and you can disagree with me or if you want to, but I had this thought: if this group does not live up to expectation this year, could we see Indianapolis with their first overall pick or their first pick in the in the draft? If there's a guy there, go and take a pass rusher in the first round. I don't think it's out of the question. I really don't.
No, I agree 100%. That's going to be a position to really monitor as the season goes. And Chris Ballard, for all that he's done really, really well in the draft, hasn't hit on that, that prime, that key pass rusher yet. You know, he's had bits and pieces of guys. You had a Kamoko Toure that just couldn't stay healthy, but had so much, upside. Same thing with Kwity Paye. Just hasn't been able to nail that pick yet. So yeah, I think I agree with you 100%. This going to be a year coming in. If you don't get that production that you need from that position, you're definitely going to want to throw another dart at that board and try to upgrade at that position. Now, I don't know if you've seen this. I'm just kind of off topic, Cody, but there's been a little bit of rumblings, and I don't know how accurate it is. Maybe some interest with, like a Chase Young, coming over as well. That might be something fun to talk about down the road. And just because of that conversation makes me think that the Colts are aware that, maybe we need to really keep a good eye on this, pass rushing unit and see if we need to upgrade at some point down the road.
Yeah. And again, I mean, those are all rumors for a reason. Who knows if there's any validity there, but yeah, I mean, I think you always have to be diligent, right? I mean, you kick the can down the road at quarterback, eventually it bits you in the butt. And so pass rush, it's not like they've done that necessarily, but they've never, Kwity Paye's the only guy, to my knowledge, Zach, that they've really invested outside of obviously sub-second round picks. But Kwity Paye, and even he was kind of a late first round pick, so they haven't really gone in the top 10 type of guy. They haven't had a Chase Young type of prospect that they've had available at that point. So it would be interesting, if they do finish 5 or 6 wins or whatever, they're around the top 10. Right. If they would go after, or like you said, go trade for a Chase Young or somebody like that, more of a proven guy to just kind of just figure it out, because you got to figure it out eventually. And you got to hit somewhere. I mean, I think those, quarterback and pass rush are two of the most important and most difficult positions to find. And so if you can figure that out, I mean, you're going to be great. If you can, get after the quarterback, and if you can have an elite quarterback, you're going to do just fine. So, yeah, it'll be interesting nonetheless to see kind of how that kind of looks, and how Kwity and Dio and all these guys really look this year. And if it continues to be more of the same, I mean, the Colts might shake it up next year when it comes to some of these guys. So we shall see how that looks. I think the last one, Zach, that I want to talk about, and you mentioned Shane Steichen and how he's going to use all these different guys, which I think is very true. But I think there's almost a overcorrection in a certain way. I don't know if that's the right word, but with some Colts fans, right, where they're Frank Reich was all the issues with the Colts last year, and Shane Steichen's going to come in, and the culture is going to be crazy, and they're going to be so good, and that could happen. I'm not saying that's not going to happen necessarily, but I think some people think that it's going to just be it's just Shane Steichen's just going to take this team to where we all thought they were going to go last year, right? And I think maybe I would just caution people to pump the brakes a little bit on that, and that's why I have it here. Just maybe some, not that I don't think he can be a great coach, but I think there's maybe some blind faith in some of these new coaches that some of the things and some of the habits that they've gotten into are just going to go away like that. And I don't think necessarily that's going to happen, Zach, right away. I think it can happen, certainly. But I think there's going to be some struggle. It's not going to be perfect. There's going to be some issues, and that's just kind of how it's going to be, when you're rebuilding a roster like you are. So, what do you think about the coaching staff and maybe some of the blind faith that some people have put into it?
Yeah, I mean, there's no magic pill, right, Cody? You can't just hire a new coach, a la like we did in the middle of the season, and automatically just change things around, right? You can't do that. That doesn't mean that I'm down on them. That doesn't mean I don't have all the faith in the world in a Shane Steichen. But maybe I would say, if you're a Colts fan, temper expectations just a bit. He's still going to be dealing with a very young quarterback. It's a new team. How is his system going to translate for this football team and what we have on this current roster, and how it's been put together? A lot of unknowns. I think it's kind of like you said, blind faith to just assume that Shane Steichen's just going to come out here and just light the world on fire, and we're going to go out there and win 10, 11, 12 football games just by changing the coach. This may take time. That doesn't mean they're bad coaches if we don't win as many games this year. Time to develop. And I think that was one of the real things, the real hangups with Chris Ballard and Frank Reich. He just didn't feel like that Frank developed his players year over year as they got better. It kind of is what it is when Frank was there. That being said, I think Shane's going to be a very good teacher of football. If you want to look at glass half full, Who knows? Maybe he does have like a Brian Dable rookie season, where he really leans on his star running back and says, okay, we're going to really do the best we can, to just draw some nice play designs, not turn the football over, and play winning football. And maybe they do have a very successful season. But I think you're right in saying, Cody, definitely temper expectations. And let's just see how this thing plays out, from week 1 to week 18. Let's see how this thing all goes about. And should be fun.
Yeah, it should be for sure. And you're right. I mean, I'm not saying that's out of the question. Not at all. I think that could happen. Like, I think that's the weird thing with the Colts this year is like, you just don't know. There's so many unknowns. There's a rookie quarterback, a rookie head coach, all these young guys you brought in, the most draft picks in the modern era for this team. Like, I mean, that's a lot of unknowns at this point. And so with that, I think it's just like you just have no idea. You can make assumptions, you can make predictions, but Richardson could look great. He could look terrible. You just don't really know until you put the pads on and it's week 1. Like, you just don't. So that'll be interesting for sure. And that's why I almost put Richardson on here. I know that would have stirred the pot for sure, but I think you have to kind of marry them together. When you get a rookie head coach that's an offensive mind that's worked with some quarterbacks and a rookie quarterback, I think the expectations for both of them, I mean, for some people, I think have probably need to be tempered just a little bit because of, both of them. I mean, Richardson, obviously the lack of game experience, Steichen, the lack of head coaching experience. I mean, I think that is a factor for sure. So that's definitely one. So that does it, guys, for some of the overrated ones. Let's move on now, Zach, to some of the underrated positions. Right. And there's a lot of them because, like I said, the Colts won 4 games last year. So everybody's sleeping on pretty much every position for the Colts right now, maybe outside of Jonathan Taylor. I mean, even Jonathan Taylor, maybe a little bit too. We'll get into that. But the first one is something we probably don't talk about enough. I think I would wager to say, Zach, a massive upgrade at the kicker position in Matt Gay. I mean, you go from where you were with the kicker position the last couple of years to where Matt Gay has been the last couple of years. I mean, I think I looked at some stats, Zach, whenever the Colts initially signed him. Matt Gay, I think, has missed like 4 kicks in the last 2 seasons or something like that. That's less than the Colts missed all of last year. So, which is just crazy to me that that's actually a reality. But I think the Colts, outside of Justin Tucker, probably got the best or one of the best kickers in the NFL. And that's another position that we probably don't talk about enough. That was one that you really struggled to replace Adam Vinatieri when, he hung it up. So, I mean, that's definitely one that I think we need to talk about as well.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I'm glad we had an opportunity to talk about this. Everybody knows full well I've been a little bit rough on Chris Ballard in the past as far as what he's done in free agency. I actually think this is one of his better signings that he's had. I know it seems silly to say, oh, how in the heck can a kicker, be one of the best signings he's had? But he can just get a kicker, Cody. He got an elite NFL kicker, right? Like, that's a game changer. When you want to talk about at the end of the first half, end of football games, situational football, especially being a young team, well, your best friend's going to be that kicker. You want your points. I mean, how many points did we leave on the table, whether it would be a missed kick, whether we were going for it because we were worried about our kicker being able to make that distance on the kick? I think 100% you're right. I mean, you can just take Justin Tucker and put him on his own island. But other than that, I think we probably end up with one of the best 2 or 3 kickers in the whole NFL. Strong leg, very accurate, and a guy that you should be able to just consider to be reliable, especially at Lucas Oil Stadium, where it's, you can close that roof, man, and there's no elements to kind of, play into the kicking game at all. Should be very successful, especially at home. And I expect him at some point this season for us to have a podcast and be celebrating a walk-off kick from Matt Gay. I really do. I think he's that good. And I think it's vital, especially to a young football team who just needs to get every single point that is out there on that football field. So I love the Matt Gay signing. I really do.
Yeah, for sure. It'll just be nice from a standpoint of like, we don't have to worry all the time when the kicker goes out there, like, will he make it, will he won't, 50-50 chance. Like, it's nice to know that more than likely he's going to make it, and you're going to feel confident in that. And you're right. I mean, if this team in a couple of years, Zach, if Richardson pans out the way we think he's going to, you're going to have to, and you're going to have an elite kicker. Like you're going to have that. If you're going to Buffalo, if you're going to Kansas City, like if you're doing that kind of stuff, like that is critical, right? I will never forget, Zach, that playoff game against the Buffalo Bills. If Rodrigo Blankenship literally nails a chip shot, don't even get me started on him. I
Oh my
can't
gosh,
stand it.
Cody.
I can't stand just the incompetence. But anyway, if he just makes that kick, that game's a completely different ball game, Zach. And so, like those things, those little things, maybe that people don't really care about, they matter. So I'm good with it. I'm good with it, and I don't think we're talking about it enough. Like, yeah, it's not the quarterback, it's not an elite pass rusher, but it's still important. And so I applaud Chris Ballard for going out there and doing that for probably his first signing in free agency is to pay a kicker that amount of money. I mean, people were just like, "Are you kidding me?" But like, I mean, I'm fine with it. If
I'm
you
all
solve
for it.
that position for the next few years, thank you. I will take that. So, absolutely. All right, let's move on to the second underrated position group here, and that has to be just the running backs, the running game in general, Zach. I talked about it briefly. I mean, just because of Jonathan Taylor's injury last year, just how this offense was in shambles last year. I mean, have we all just forgotten that Jonathan Taylor led the league in rushing yards 2 years ago? And not to mention, Zach Moss looked pretty good last year in limited action, right? He had a couple 100-yard games. So I don't know. And also, you finally have a mobile quarterback as well, and Anthony Richardson that can actually, do some stuff with the RPO game, things you just haven't been able to do the last couple of years. So, I mean, you could really have a dangerous running game, Zach, I think pretty easily with a combination of all these things. And also, going back to the coaching staff, Shane Steichen, we know what he liked to do with Jalen Hurts last year. We know the ways he was able to use all those different running backs in the running back room. And I think those sorts of things, like that position group's probably slept on too much, is just this running game in general.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I really am excited about this running game, Cody. I really am because you mentioned earlier people have just kind of forgotten that Jonathan Taylor a couple of years ago was the most dominant. I mean, he led the league in yards, he led the league in touchdowns. I mean, he was just incredible that year. Single handedly, put the New England Patriots on ice. In that game, that was just I'll never forget that run. It just looked like a heat seeking missile busting out of that backfield to just take off for the touchdown. He's special. Our quarterback has the potential to be incredibly special. And the one thing that I think that we don't think about enough with our team, there's so many dynamic runners in the NFL. You've got a Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen. You could throw some of those guys, Justin Herbert, whatever you want to do. Not any of them have a Jonathan Taylor to hand the football off to, right? Like they're just out there using their legs, but they don't have an all-pro level running back. That is a real serious dilemma if you're a defense and you have to make a decision. Am I going to go for Jonathan Taylor or am I going to go for a guy who is equally as fast and bigger at the quarterback position and Anthony Richardson, which is unbelievable that I'm saying that. But you're going to have to make a decision. And then on top of that, you mentioned Zach Moss earlier. I mean, he had a really solid, we had that trade. It was a really nice find by Chris Ballard to get them to throw not just that draft pick in there, but to get them to throw, a running back in return. And it's kind of a try before you buy, right? Like we got to see him in kind of an audition. Do we want to bring him back or do we not? And I think he looked definitely good enough to be in that fold as well. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see this running game. And I think it could be possibly one of the most dynamic running games just from a simple standpoint is we're going to need to run the football, right? Like that's one of the easiest ways to not have turnovers, to really, go back to what you were, a couple years ago and being a running football team where you leaned on football teams and you just knew as a Colts fan, you're going to give the ball to JT. He's going to put this game on ice, and he's going to win these games in the fourth quarter, and there's nothing they can do to stop him. So very excited about this running game and just what they can do and how creative that Shane Steichen and his team can come together and use these running backs to their advantage.
Yeah, it's crazy because like they were doing that with literally not even passing the football like at all. And so it's crazy to me that like literally Anthony Richardson, all he has to do is have some semblance of a passing game formulated, and that just makes that running game so much more dangerous. I mean, teams aren't going to know what you because you can easily, play action over the top like so easily. And so teams are going to like not just fully commit. You're going to be so much more unpredictable if he can show a little bit of that, as well. So there's so much you can do, which is just exciting in itself that like this offense could be so dynamic in the running game because of all these different players, all these different schemes, all these different situations. So don't sleep, guys, on the Colts running game this year. That's for sure. Another position group, Zach, that I think it's really been, I feel like the last 5 to 6 years, it's been dragged through the mud for years and years and years. It's the wide receiver group. And I'll just say this, like, I don't think that right now the Colts have really a guy that's a top 15 receiver. I don't know where you stand on Pittman. I think at this point, I don't consider him quite there, but like they have some solid options here, right? They drafted Alec Pierce last year. They drafted Josh Downs. They signed Isaiah McKenzie. They have, Brashad Perriman even. They re-signed Ashton Doolin. So, like, they don't have anybody that's like a true number one as of right now. But I feel like the Colts have actually a decent amount of talent, and they've put a decent amount of investment into getting guys, and not just similar players, like guys with different skill sets, right? You got the bigger body, if you use a basketball analogy, the power forwards, right? You have those type of guys, but you also have the speedsters. You have the Josh Downs, the Isaiah McKenzie, some of those guys that can be, do more work in the slot and things like that, and can really make defenses, worry over the top, right? So you got a combination, I think, a nice kind of complement of wide receivers that really offer different skill sets and can really like make your offense kind of unpredictable. And like, who do you defend, right? Kind of like we were talking about with the running game is like, who do you defend? Josh Downs can outrun you, Pittman can outjump you, and so can Pierce. That's kind of was his big thing last year. So these wide receivers, while they're not great, I do think people are kind of just saying, the Colts have a bad wide receiver core. It's not, it sucks, whatever. Maybe not like local as much, but I feel like the national media is kind of like, yeah, the Colts suck at wide receiver. But I don't necessarily think that's the case at all, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all if you put all of the parts together in the pot, you've got one really good group, right? Like you mentioned earlier, you don't have the Debo Samuels, the Tyreek Hill, the DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams. You don't have that guy. However, what you do is you have really, really good talent and depth. And one of the points that you brought up that I thought was so good is that every single one of our wide receivers brings a different skill set, right? They have a different layer that they can bring to this football team, which I like. It gives you so much flexibility in games when you want to do in-game adjustments. Love, love, love. Don't like, love Josh Downs as a pick in the third round. I just think that kid he's unique. He's special. He's one of those guys that's probably just going to be underrated his whole career. But all he's going to do is go out there and just catch the football and produce, move the chains, as well as Michael Pittman Jr. in a contract year. Look, I mean, the debate's always going to be, is he a number one? Is he a number two? We're going to find out probably this year what that really comes down to. But that being said, he is a very good football player. He's moved the chains. He's been very reliable. I know he got frustrated at the end of the season. We were losing football games, and it was just like, holy cow, can nobody actually hit me and throw me the football? That being said, he's been very, very productive over his young career, as well as I think Alec Pierce showed a lot of potential. I just don't think anybody could get him the football at the end of the season, right? Like here's a guy who can stretch the field. He catches the game winner against the Jaguars, and then nobody else, Matt Ryan's arm's falling off of his shoulder at the end of the season. Then you're just going through all of your guys, Nick Foles, Sam Ehlinger, and just no one gets a chance to come out there and really build this chemistry. Well, I think he's a young guy, going to get a chance to work with this young quarterback and build that chemistry. I do like the Isaiah McKenzie. It's just an extra wrinkle if you want to go four wide and have that, over the top deep threat. Turns out now with, the Isaiah Rodgers news, he might end up helping you a little bit, in some special teams areas as well. So it might be really vital. They got a really good mix there, Cody. And I do like their wide receiver group. I think they're all capable of doing different things to help this football team win football games, and collectively a very good unit. I don't know that they have, obviously the marquee star. However, I do think Josh Downs over a 2 or 3 year period might develop into that volume catcher, that 80, 85, 90 catches a year type of guy. It might take over a little bit of that T.Y. Hilton role and become a fan favorite for the Colts.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. Lots of young talent there at wide receiver, and we will think we'll know a lot more. We'll know a lot more at this time next year. So I'm hoping we get a lot more clarity with the wide receiver position. I think there's a ton of talent that nobody's really talking about. So, yeah, that's one that I think is a little bit underrated as well. And I think people kind of threw it under the rug a little bit when maybe quarterback needed to be a little bit more of the blame than maybe people are thinking. So, yeah, guys, that will do it here for looking at some overrated and underrated positions for the Indianapolis Colts. Zach, thank you, my friend, for coming on. It's always a pleasure. Looking forward, man, if we can get some media credentials being down there. Hopefully you're able to make it this year. I know we were able to connect last year a little bit, and that was awesome. And so hopefully we'll be able to do that again this year.
Absolutely, man. Looking forward to it. And Cody, I think it's going to be exciting season to cover the Indianapolis Colts. And I think that dark cloud that we have over us the last couple of years is starting to see a little sunlight come through now. So, super optimistic and excited for the season to go.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll see how many games the team wins, but hey, they have to be better than last year. So we'll have some fun. And thank you so much, man, again. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Really appreciate it. As always, guys, go Colts.